We have a new owner of the Big Ten. They wear maize and blue, just like our guest, Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast. Get on over there, check out Steve's work. It's pretty outstanding, especially when he has particular guests on every Tuesday. Steve, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
I've done better from a football standpoint. There's no question about that, but we'll make it through. We will make it through.
Only 18 more to go, Mark. Buckle up, man. Cry me a river. Put that, I love you, but put that away. I put up with this for 20 damn years. 20 years. 20 years.
There were a couple breaks in there.
No, there weren't. We won one game in 20 years, and it was when y'all had an interim coach, which was even more pathetic. I'd have preferred to lose that one, too. It's even more pathetic to win one when they have an interim coach. 20 years of slap. They had to make that into a movie. 20 years of slapping. 20 years of slap. So y'all can buckle in, enjoy the next few years. Okay.
Well, I don't believe we're going to concede that, but we'll see how it goes here. So, all right. So there's a football nuts and bolts portion of this: talent, execution, scheme, strategy, all that. There's a psychological standpoint of this in regards to who showed up and who didn't. Then there's a historical standpoint. So I guess we'll start with the strategy in regards to, we talked about it last week. We've talked about it for weeks, and I know that you've talked about it individually a number of times. So nothing really surprised me from a approach standpoint, at least from the Ohio State side. How did you see Michigan's approach to this?
Well, you'll recall that you and I have had this. I've had this conversation with you and others going back to January with the hiring of Jim Knowles. That he obviously is a very fine defensive coordinator. I mean, you're coordinating top 10 defenses at Oklahoma State. They haven't done that since Dexter Manley couldn't read. Okay, so that's not a school that even when it's really good, plays really good defense. So that's legit. But, from my background, I used to professionally cover Iowa State for a living. I'm very familiar with the Big 12. It is not in any way, shape, or form a man ball league. And Knowles' defensive philosophy is very similar to Don Brown's, right? You and I had this conversation for the last 10 months in various forums ever since he was hired, right? I mean, I've been pointing this out. And what I saw on Saturday, man, looked a lot like Don Brown in 2018, 2019, except we didn't know your signals. Like Ryan Day, your guys actually knew our signals, okay? So on top of the fact that we had a defensive scheme that just had no second-level defense, you also knew our signals, okay? But it was very similar. And I don't blame Ohio State for playing that way at all, given the way that Michigan had played all year long. I mean, I was at the Nebraska game. You and I talked just a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and when you're there, and the eye in the sky doesn't lie. And Michigan knew that Nebraska. I mean, they were rope-a-dope in Nebraska out here like Muhammad Ali all game long. They knew they couldn't lose that game. So, I mean, they were out there trying to throw the ball, trying to do it, and they couldn't do it. And so this idea that we were just going to flip a switch, I didn't believe that at all. And I didn't think we had much chance to win the game because of that. And I thought that I don't know what Urban Meyer was talking about at halftime in terms of adjusting the scheme. I would have loved it if Ohio State adjusted the scheme. I mean, far be it for me. I mean, Urban Meyer is arguably the greatest coach in Big Ten history, certainly up there with, Woody Hayes, Fielding Yost, Bo Schembechler, Amos Stagg. But if I'm a Michigan fan, I'd have loved the idea of you guys backing out of that. We're just going to grind it out and play the way we want to play. And that game would go by even faster. I thought the real issue is that that Ohio State tried to play us in a way that Illinois played us the week before. It wasn't just very aggressively, but the corner blitz off the short end to, when we've got that tight end in motion, they took a lot of that defensive scheme that Illinois used a couple of weeks ago and tried to deploy that. And I just think making those kinds of adjustments in 1 week when that's not who you are and not what you're about. And JJ McCarthy, in the end, it came down to execution. He made some throws. That first throw that he made to Cornelius Johnson, where he is just about to get decked, and he hits him on that 5 route on that third down. And then CJ just breaks one tackle and he's off to the races, Ty Streets, 1996 style. that play, and I even tweeted it at the time, that reminded me so much of Ty Streets when Sean Springs slipped. And that game was very similar. Ohio State was just chewing up yards between the 20s in that game back in the day and could not punch it in the end zone and put us away and dig us a hole. Same thing kind of happened here. And then for Michigan to come right back with another shock play right after that, that I think that is psychologically when the game flipped, was those two plays right there. And I thought going in that the game would either be an Ohio State cover or Michigan win. And knowing how injured we were, I mean, the reality is Mike Morris might have been the best defensive lineman in the Big Ten this year. He offered us nothing in that game. He was just there for moral support. He's out there with a high ankle sprain. He had no lift, no juice at all. Everybody saw what happened when Blake Corum tried to run. So I just thought we had too many injuries. And Ohio State's, of course, a very beat-up football team, too. The injuries that we had, though, were causing us to play a different way, right? We were not going to get away with just lining up and running the ball with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards 60 times, which is what we want to do. That first throw, that first big play that JJ made where Ohio State is barreling in and he plants his foot in the ground and throws that freaking dart, that's the best throw of his career. That was an NFL throw right there. And I think that, and then he learned his lesson from all year long overthrowing guys. He didn't try to lead Cornelius Johnson, just put him on him when he was that wide open. And then maybe the best touch pass he's had all year was the one he threw to Colston Loveland for the third touchdown. And now if you're Ohio State, you're staggered now. You have, Michigan's got 10 yards rushing, yet they've got all these big plays. What do you do? Do you back out a little bit? Do you show any hesitation? And now Donovan Edwards going Emmitt Smith, in 1993, carrying with his offhand because he's got a cast in the other. But, what was it last year? Michigan got like 190 yards before contact against Ohio State. This year, it ended up being 150 yards before contact against Ohio State. And so Edwards really didn't have to worry about ball security or anything. Same thing, a little bit of hesitation now with respect to the passing game. He can be patient, wait for that crease. And then he's a Tyrone Wheatley kind of a sprinter. It's just you're watching a thoroughbred out there, just outrunning angles, track guy, great speed guy. I think that Ohio State had a chance to bury Michigan early. Michigan took the punch, weathered the emotion, and then made Ohio State play its game the rest of the way. Only 3 points in the second half. And I think this was, last year's game, Mark, was an exorcism for the Michigan program. This year's game is a statement that Michigan is back, fully back, where it belongs, and you have to give Jim Harbaugh credit. I'm trying to think of a coach that was that close to justifiably being canned, and then to come right back, reinvent himself. I mean, Mike Krzyzewski did that, almost got canned in year 3 or something at Duke, and then reinvented himself and became arguably the greatest coach in American team sports. It is not easy to do what Jim Harbaugh did. And what he's done here now is we're now on the cutting edge. What Ohio State does, that's what everybody does now. We're the matchup problem now. You have to match up with us each week. We force you to play a different way now, and I mean, it's just, if you ever wondered in its heyday, what would Wisconsin look like with an actual 5-star quarterback, not Graham Mertz, like an actual 5-star quarterback and real receivers? If anybody ever wondered, what would that look like if Wisconsin had a 5-star quarterback and real receivers to go with everything else? Well, now you have your answer. That's essentially the program that Jim Harbaugh has built here the last couple of years.
And certainly that's what we've talked about a number of times. Yeah, I've envisioned that for Wisconsin. Could they break out of that top 15 mold and be a truly elite program with a couple of those guys?
Yeah.
Flipping it to, so when you got 2 on a collision course and they're undefeated, somebody's going to lose the game. Everybody can excel at their jobs and do everything right. And somebody's got to lose the game, but that was clearly not the situation here. We had a number of letdowns, meltdowns on the Ohio State side. And I'm going to go to Ryan Day in regards to, you're an aggressive play caller as is, you're an aggressive game manager. You've got a 4th and 3 to 5 situation in which your offense had overcome 1st and 35. You're down in the second half. You're in plus territory with your offense having just executed 3 plays to put you in position. And it just seemed like that was inexplicable to me, because even in this day and age of advanced metrics, even conservative teams recognize that situation as a situation in which you go for it. And here we have a team that has supreme confidence typically in its quarterback and wide receiver play to convert on that situation, and they don't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what happened in this game, and I recognize it because I've seen it a lot, the script flipped over the last 20 years on the other end, is, I think of the old Mike Tyson line, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think that's what happened here. I think, as Michigan fans who've always looked at this rivalry, Twitter histrionics and Twitter hate aside, this has been, lots of Michigan and Ohio State players are great friends for many, many years after they play. It's, I would call it sports hate. It's not personal. A lot of great respect. It's not usually, a game with a lot of personal fouls. And, I go back to the 97 game when we were in the throes of the 2-10-1 stretch there with John Cooper, the David Boston antics in that game, you'll recall, with Charles Woodson. And you'll remember I pointed this out on my end a couple of years ago, watching Carlo Kemp, a team captain, try to untie J.K. Dobbins' shoe and twist his ankle in a pile. That's just, no, dude. No, we don't do that here. They do that down the road in East Lansing. We don't do that stuff here. Okay. And we haven't seen a lot of that in this rivalry over the years. It's not Michigan State. It's not Auburn, Alabama. It's very physical, but guys are out there trying to win championships. There's too much at stake to be a douchebag. All right. And typically when one side loses its psychological edge, that's when it has occurred, like David Boston, like Carlo Kemp a couple of years ago. The personal foul on, was it 88 there for Ohio State? 15 yards out of bounds. What is that? Okay. I mean, that to me, I think that when Ryan Day talked last year, and as Michigan fans, a lot of us were like, wow, I mean, we knew you guys took this seriously, and we do too, but you're scarred. I mean, you lost one time in 20 years. In a legitimate contest here. And I think that the pressure that Ohio State put on itself, I've told you all year long, I cannot recall a team that's a blue blood in the Big Ten, returning champion, preseason, and its starting quarterback. Now, of course, we switched quarterbacks, but originally the starting quarterback was back, that got less pub than Michigan did. I mean, everybody acted like, even Ohio State, well, last year was an outlier and a fluke. And I just think all that pressure came to bear. And you could hear Joel Klatt talk about in the third quarter just what it is like inside of this stadium. It's just a powder keg. And I think that got to Ryan Day. I think that got to the players. And I think Michigan is comfortable in its identity. And Ohio State, you have to remember, particularly a program that recruits at Ohio State's level, Mark, what is there, only 8 guys on this team in the 2 deep that played in the 2019 game that Ohio State won going away? I mean, For you and I, it seems like, wow, this is cataclysmic that the Michigan's turned this around. But if I'm a guy that's only coming to Ohio State to typically play for 3 years, I didn't play him in 2020. Then I lost last year. Like, I don't have that frame of reference. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a 4th or 5th year guy. I've only got 8 guys on this entire team that have a pair of gold pants. Right now, Michigan's cleaning up in Ohio recruiting because Ohio State's barely recruiting a lot of those guys. It's more of a, they're going everywhere and getting top players out of every state. And I just think that Stanford, Oregon analogy that I gave you about a month ago played itself out here. And maybe the best summation of this, I heard this from Andy Staples over at The Athletic. Michigan is a team uniquely built to beat Ohio State. Ohio State is a team that is built to put 50 on Michigan State. And I think, and everybody else. And I think that's a very good summation here. And I think that was the secret sauce of Urban Meyer's success. Yeah, he brought cutthroat recruiting to the Big Ten, but if Meyer had not come here, Jim Harbaugh would have just brought it with him when he came. Lots of guys are cutthroat recruiters. What Meyer did is he built a college program with NFL players. Alabama levels of buy-in and buy into the culture. They didn't call it the process, but it was a college football culture. feels very NFL to me at Ohio State. And then it feels like last year they got punched in the mouth. Like Jim just ran an NFL program here too, realized it didn't work, reinvented himself, built a college program, punches Ohio State in the mouth. And now it kind of feels like Ryan Day and Ohio State are trying to be a college football team. Like they're verbalizing it, talking about it. And it worked for like a quarter and a half until Michigan was like, you guys know that you can drive up down the field on us all game long. We're going to keep coming, right? Like, we're not laying down. You guys know that, right? We're not Michigan State. We're not every other team in the Big Ten. We're going to punch back. You might kick our ass, but, we're going to bloody your nose on the way out. You guys know this is going to be a fist fight. And I think Ohio State was like, no, we didn't know it was going to be a fist fight. And then didn't know what to do once it became one.
And part of that leadership, any good coach will tell you, obviously has to come from the players. It starts with the coach, but they want to be able to hand it off to a section of players. And I don't want to read too much into this because I don't know this for sure. I'm reading body language. I'm just reading interactions. JJ McCarthy appears to be the type of guy that if he was playing linebacker or guard, he would be the leader on the team.
Right.
And obviously, when you're the quarterback, you have to be the leader. CJ Stroud looks like if he was playing another position, he would just be an elite player that played that position.
Very California cool. Listen, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. We need a franchise quarterback. I hope we don't draft him. We already got a guy like that. His name's Jared Goff. Not really fiery. Can't make a playoff platform, off schedule. Needs to be surrounded by elite players. And when he is, can make incredible throws, but can't manufacture things. I mean, I take Bryce Young all day. I don't even know Stroud has all the measurables. I take Bryce Young all day and twice on Sunday over CJ Stroud for my Detroit Lions. If those were the choices we had on the board, wouldn't even think twice about it.
Yeah, just from a running aspect as well. So I see it out of the lack of leadership component. And then also, I just think in this day and age, certainly there is a place for just a throwing quarterback, but you better be super exceptional. And he is much of the time. So he's still an extremely valuable player. I don't want to downgrade him, but sure helps when you got those JJ McCarthy legs.
I mean, that run where McCarthy, did you see him out? Did you see him not wait for his pulling guard there?
Yes.
He could have waited. Let Keegan throw that block and then probably dance in the end zone. No, dude took on all that contact and didn't wait. And I think that, there's been little signs of this. You and I have talked. I mean, the Ohio State radio guy a few weeks ago saying on the air, I think we should play all these games in domes to get a true test of athleticism. Gene Smith saying if we do home college football playoff games, we won't play him at the Horseshoe. I mean, I'm just blown away by this stuff. I just, and I think that was the Urban Meyer. He's been saying all year on Fox, this is Michigan, Ohio State is a line of scrimmage game. And Michigan's fine with that, and Ohio State wants to play 7-on-7. And they even got the weather they wanted and everything else. I think it'll be fascinating to see where they go from here. I mean, from what I understand, we're going to be loaded next year, Mark. Blake Corum will go pro, but a lot of these guys are going to come back. Michigan has an interesting NIL program where it won't get involved in pay for play with recruits, and it's hurting it. That's hurting it this recruiting cycle. Actually, they don't want to pay a bunch of guys up front. They think I think they're claiming it's about NCAA rules. They don't believe that. I think it's because they're worried you end up with culture problems like what's going on at Texas A&M, et cetera. Pay a bunch of guys that haven't done a damn thing. These aren't pros. They're 18-year-olds, right? Okay. And so what Michigan is doing is offering huge cash incentive NILs for veterans. Like I think Eric All in any previous environment after hurting himself would go off to the NFL. He'll come back next year. He's going to make more money playing at Michigan next year, I think, than he would have made as a 4th or 5th round pick in the NFL. And so Michigan's going to have a very experienced team, guys that have been in the program 3 or 4 years of strength and conditioning, been a part of this culture change, comfortable in their own skin, comfortable in their identity. I will be fascinated to see where Ohio State goes from here before next year's game.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of direction, something similar to what Jim Harbaugh did in a much different way. But we know that they're going to collect a great recruiting class. We know that, but not just a collection of players that can play and win the 9 games in their sleep, but yeah, a true team, a true direction, a true vision, and a true toughness that was talked about. And I believe that they truly thought that they were there and that they had proven something. And they did dedicate to it. I believe that,
I
but
do
it
too.
wasn't enough.
I mean, Mark, we had 10 yards rushing in an entire half. Okay, 10. Now, some of it is Blake's knee. Some of it is it took a half for Donovan to get comfortable carrying in the other hand. But come on, man, it was the same offense. There weren't a lot of holds there. Okay, we had 10 yards at the half. I just think that Ohio State. Well, you know what? I don't want to give you guys help. Kick their ass for 20 years, okay? But there's a certain Rocky III vibe here. Michigan has been, after what happened in 2020, Michigan went Clubber Lang, man. We went into the basement. We're doing chin-ups on, pipes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. We went street. We took the dirt road and had to completely rebuild our image. I think Ohio State, Rocky's working hard at that gold gym. He's sweating too, but he's doing photos with pinups and, like signing, brand deals and everything else. And I just think the program has lost some of that eye of the tiger a little bit. And I will be fascinated to see if Ryan Day, who Jim was right, was born on third and credited with a triple, was handed a program from at worst, the third best college football coach since World War II. And he was handed that program at peak, at peak potency. And now we'll see if he can be that guy. He seems more of an NFL guy to me, more of an X's and O's guy, more of a guy that wants to draw stuff up in a lab and is really damn good at it. And that's what the NFL is. It's a coach's league. And so we'll see. I'll be very fascinated to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, it's certainly not fireable offenses, but in the Buckeye State, it's close to it. It is certainly close to it, losing 2 straight to Michigan. All right, Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast. Got to catch him there. That is the place to be for Michigan football, Big Ten football as well, with his podcast, The Bigger Ten, as well. Steve, we always appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again this week.
You got it, guys. Thank you. Go Blue.